Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action, are known as the pradhana. So, continuing from the previous verse, Lord Kapila is explaining the constitution of material nature. In the previous verse, we had read the unmanifested eternal combination of the 3 modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhan. So now, further details of what does that unmanifest state comprise of. So here are the 24 elements which Sankhya philosophy discusses. So these 24 elements are explained as 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then 4 internal senses: mind, intelligence and false ego, plus the contaminated consciousness that is also counted in this. 5 senses for gathering knowledge: eyes, nose, tongue, ear, skin, sense of touch. 5 outward organs of action. So tongue has 2 functions actually, like we say, Sevan Mukhe Jivvato. So tongue is considered a knowledge acquiring sense also, and also working sense. So when we say Sevan Mukhe Jivvato, the knowledge acquiring feature is, many times you have read Prabhupada saying, tasting prasada offered to the Lord. So tasting is one, and chanting or vibrating the holy name. So when it's tasting, it is knowledge acquiring sense. When it's vibrating, it is working sense. So tongue has 2 functions. It is both ways, knowledge acquiring sense also, and it is working sense also. Then there are arms, legs, and anus and genitals. These are working senses. Then there are 5 subtle elements. These subtle elements are objects of the senses. Like eyes have rupa, rup means form. Then tongue has ras, ras means taste. Skin has sparsh, means feeling, touch. Then nose, it has gandha, gandha means smell. And then ears have dhvani, shabda, that is sound. So these are the objects of the senses. So like this, 24 elements of Sankhya are explained. Now the discussion is going on about pradhana. Pradhana, that is where Lord Kapila started. And then how this material nature is formed, composed of. So, the most important of all these is the contaminated consciousness, which is influenced by 3 modes. In the previous verse, when we had discussed previous verse, we analyzed that how these material elements have no power to influence us. Material elements are dead matter. They are just elements. Right? But when 3 modes influence our consciousness, then we get affected by these material elements. Say this table is there. This table is lying. It's dead matter. But when 3 modes enter, then they generate an idea. This is my table. The moment 3 modes influence us, it was a table till now. Now it has become my table. We started getting influenced by this table. Now something happens to this table, we feel bad. Something good happens to this table, we feel good. Somebody takes away this table, we become little upset. So table per se has no power to affect our emotions. But when these 3 modes of material nature enter into our consciousness, they bind us with this table, and then the emotions get affected. So now, same way, now here, Prabhupada explains in the purport. The sum total of 24 elements described here is called Yonir Mahat Brahma. Okay. So according to Bhagavad Gita means where it comes in Bhagavad Gita? Which chapter? 14th chapter. Tasam Brahmahat Yonir Aham Bija Prada Pita. Yes. So, Lord explains that we are seeds, He is the seed giving Father, and these seeds have to be, when a farmer does cultivation, he does farming. So, there are three things. One is the farmer, second one is the seed, third is the land. All three are required because seed cannot plant itself into the land, and without land, seed will not germinate, and without seed, farmer and land, then there is no purpose. So, like that, this material creation is like land, Supreme Lord is like farmer, and we are the seed. So, Supreme Lord implants the living entity into this material nature, and the living entity acquires three modes of material nature. Three gunas he acquires, and based on these three gunas, he develops a kind of body, he develops a kind of mindset. Now, Prabhupada says in the purport, in the Srimad, Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures, the sum total of 24 elements, pradhana, is also described as Yonir Mahad Brahma. It is the source of the birth. It is the source of the birth and subsistence of all living entities. So, when we say it is source of the birth, means birth of the body. Because soul never takes birth, soul never dies. So, now, this procedure, Lord Krishna explains, Brahma Mahad Yonir. First, Prabhupada explains there are three Brahma. What are three Brahma? First Brahma is the soul, second Brahma is the material nature, and the third Brahma is the controller of these two Brahma. That's why they are called three Brahmas. Prabhupada quotes, Bhokta Bhogyam Preritaram Chamatva. Bhokta means the living entity who tends to be enjoyer. Bhokta. Bhogyam means material nature is the Bhogyam. Right. Preritaram Chamatva Sarvam Proktam Trividham Brahmam Etat. So there are three, and supreme controller of these two. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the Jiva individual soul is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller, so two, Prakriti is Brahman, Jiva is also Brahman, and the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller because he controls Jiva and Prakriti both. So, when we say, Lord Krishna says, Mam Yonir Mahad Brahma. So, this Brahma refers to Prakriti. So, Lord Krishna, he says, the total material substance called Brahman. So, here it is referred to as material substance called Brahman. So, this is Prakriti Brahman. Is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. Next, says, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. Material nature consists of three modes, goodness, passion and ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with nature, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So in brief, Lord has explained how a living entity acquires body in this material nature. So when a living entity falls from the spiritual world, right, that time he is not affected or contaminated by three modes. After entering into this material world, immediately three modes of material nature capture him. Right? He's entrapped by those three modes. Then he also acquires a material body. Now, based on, like we read, from Prabhupada's teachings, that when a living entity falls from the spiritual world, because he is sinless, he has no material karma, the first position he is awarded is of Brahma. Brahma means Lord Brahma, the controller, not Brahma. So, first position is awarded is the supreme deity of this universe, that is Lord Brahma, supreme, Jiva of this universe. So, after that, if the living entity agrees to go back to Godhead, he is allowed to go. But if he gets a taste of this material enjoyment and he decides to continue his material existence, then he is taken through all the species, 84 lakh species of life. So we are all, in one sense, retired Brahmas. We were Brahmas sometime. We chose to stay back, and then we got into the cycle of birth and death, and all. We crossed 84 lakh species, or at least 80 lakh species. Now, based on the three modes, the kind of modes one acquires in human life, his actions are, decided, or his actions are performed. Now, based on these three modes, there are two things. One is the kind of consciousness or desires he carries, and second is the kind of actions he performs. This is where the fourth internal sense, that is pradhana or a contaminated consciousness, comes into picture. So all others are material elements. Contaminated consciousness is what influences the jiva to work, or motivates the jiva to work. When we have contaminated consciousness, so there are two things. One is desire, the kind of desire we generate. Second is the kind of actions we perform. Right? These two govern our future lives. Right? So there is an analogy in 15th chapter. Just like the air carries aroma, right? The living entity carries material consciousness from one birth to another. So the air, per se, it is odorless. It has no smell of its own. But say now a wind is flowing and it's going over a rose garden. It will pick the smell of roses. Further, when it goes over some other jasmine garden, it will pick the smell of jasmine. It will go over some trash area, garbage area. It will pick the smell of that garbage. But per se, air doesn't have any smell of its own. Like that, living entity doesn't have any material desires of its own. But when these three modes affect or capture the living entity, based on these three modes, he starts generating the desires. Right? When he starts generating the desires culminate into action. Based on these actions, his next body is decided. So there are two factors which govern our next body. One is the desire and the second is the action. Both are explained in Bhagavad Gita. 8th chapter explains, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajityante kalevaram tam tamemeti konteya sada tad bhava bhavita. So whatever state of being one has at the time of quitting his body, right, when the person is quitting his body, most prominent, most strong desires, because how desires have come? Desires have come because of attachment. These modes lead us to attachment. If somebody is in Sattva Guna, he will have Sattvic attachment. His desires will be Sattvic. Somebody is in Rajoguna, he will have Rajasic desires, Rajasic attachment. His desires will be Rajasic. Somebody is in Tamoguna, his consciousness or attachment will be Tamasic. His desires will be Tamasic. What one cultivates in this life, what one nourishes in this life, those desires, those consciousness become prominent at the time of death. So based on that, he is provided that kind of situation. Right? Second is the kind of karma one performs. Based on karma, Purusha Prakriti Sthohi. So Lord Krishna says, our next body is decided by 8th chapter, it says desire. 13th chapter, it says by karma. Purusha Prakriti Sthohi Bhunjte Prakritir Jan Gunan Karanam Gunasangasya Sad Asad Yoni Janmasu. So, the Purusha, here Purusha refers to soul, living entity. Prakriti Sthohi, it is situated or implanted in the Prakriti. Right? Lord says, I impregnate the material nature, put the jiva in the material nature. Purusha Prakriti Stha. Stha means sthapit, placed, situated or planted. Bhunjte Prakritir Jan Gunan. So he is enjoying based on the three modes of nature. Karanam Guna Sangha. So the kind of Guna Sangha, kind of attachment or association of the mode he has, Sad Asad Yoni. He gets a good life, higher, superior life, or inferior life, or medium, Rajoguna life in the middle planets. Karanam Guna Sangasya Sad Asat Yoni Janmasu. So, based on three modes, one performs those kind of actions. Based on those actions, sad or asad yoni, good or bad life or species, he means enjoyable or punishable species he receives. So now, many times we see, Prabhupada quoting one example, from I think Skand Puran says, there was a very miserly person. There was a very miserly person, and he was very envious also. So he was very old, and he had a nice house, and there was a basement, storeroom in the basement, and he had hidden lot of gold in that. And the door to that basement storeroom was always locked, and he used to very guard that key very vigilantly. So always his sons would ask, what is there in the storeroom, what is there in the storeroom, and he would not reveal, because lot of wealth he had accumulated, and he didn't want them to squander that wealth. And miserly people, they'll have but they'll not spend. So eventually, because he was very envious of others, and very this kind of person, he died, and next birth he became a serpent, right, because of his karma. And at the time of death, he was constantly meditating upon his wealth. So because his meditation was constantly upon his wealth, he took birth into that basement near the wealth, and his karma was full of envy towards others. He got the body of a serpent. So his body was decided by his karma, serpent, and his location of birth was decided by his consciousness. So he took birth in that basement where his jewels were stored. Then eventually, when he died, so his sons, after whatever they did to him, then they got the key, access to the key, and then they decided, let's open that basement and see what is there inside. So they go and open the basement, and they see there is so much of gold, jewels, gemstones, all so many things are kept. So that, oh wow, we have got a fortune now. But then they see that there is a snake guarding, so they don't know that is he's their father who is guarding this wealth for them. So there is a snake, there is a danger. So first let's kill the snake, and they kill him, throw him away, throw that body away, and then enjoy that wealth. So we understand from this that how consciousness and karma both affect our next body. Now, same way, when Lord Krishna says, Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bham, previous to that he says, Anta Kale Cha Mameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram, Yah Prayati Samad Bhavam Yati Nastyata Samshaya. If you keep your consciousness in me at the time of death, then you'll surely attain me. In this there is no doubt. Right? So, if we keep our consciousness fixed in Krishna, fixed in the Supreme Lord, then we'll immediately, after quitting this body, Yah Prayati, Anta Kale Chamameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram. Kalevaram with this body, one who gets freed from this body, Muktva from this body, Yah Prayati Samad Bhavam. Immediately he'll come to me. So, the whole program is about this mind which is influenced by three modes. So, in Bhagavad Gita, when Lord is analyzing in the 6th chapter, right, he is explaining to Arjuna the whole process of yoga. Repeatedly, if you analyze carefully the instructions of the Lord in 6th chapter, that is Dhyan Yoga, meditation, he has instructed only two principles. One is detach from matter, and second is attach to Supreme Lord. And the whole chapter, if you see, Krishna's instructions, first is detach from matter. Second is attach to Supreme Lord, attach to Krishna. Third, how to repeatedly practice this detachment from matter, attachment to Krishna in routine life. How to repeatedly practice. So, influence of three modes is very dangerous actually, because it is Vishaya. Vishaya means poison. So now, here Lord tells to Arjuna how to detach from matter. Right? Because Arjuna in 14th chapter, he is asking Krishna, what is the position, what are the symptoms? What are the symptoms and characteristics of a person who has transcended three modes? So Lord Krishna explains again the same thing. one who is free from material influence, and one who is fully attached to Supreme Lord. So Lord says, how one can get freed from the influence of these three modes. A person is said to have attained yoga when having renounced all material desires. He neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. So, action plays a great role. Action plays a great role in purifying oneself from the influence of three modes. Who neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. So, when we restrain ourselves from the acts of sense gratification, right? So, for us, restricting from acts of sense gratification is we have a very nice predefined life. Satovritti means very sattvic, gentle life plus devotional practices. So, even the regular conduct is sattvic, right? The dealings are sattvic. Plus the spiritual life, the potency of our devotional service, sadhana, devotional service, association of devotees, prasadam, all these things rapidly purify. Now, second thing is, so he neither acts for sense gratification. In this, somebody voluntarily acts for sense gratification, then he is under the influence and is increasing the influence of three modes. He is increasing the influence of three modes. Right? Again, he is entangling. And by increasing the influence of three modes, it will always lead to misery. So next, then Lord says, a man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Elevate himself by his own mind. So that's why mind is so important. The instructions of Lord in Bhagavad Gita are directed towards this because our elevation in spiritual life depends on the mind. Elevate himself through mind, one can degrade himself also through mind. Right? So, to control this mind, one has to adhere to devotional practices. One has to adhere to discipline of devotional life. Otherwise, three modes will always be acting on us. Now, how this happens? Like adherence to these devotional practices. Krishna says two things one has to. What is the mood? There are two things Lord has told. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. Before telling the procedure, Krishna says what should be the mindset of a yogi, of a sadhaka. So what are the two things Krishna said? Determination and faith. Now Prabhupada explains determination as the yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. So one has to be very patient. I am practicing for so many years, then why Rajoguna is not going? Why Tamoguna is not going? So one has to practice with patience. That is first part of determination. Second, Prabhupada further says determination. And pursue this course with great perseverance, not becoming discouraged if there is any delay in the attainment of success. If there is delay, still one should not get disturbed, right? One should not get discouraged. So determination has two aspects that Prabhupada explains. One is patiently and without getting discouraged, persistently. Perseverance has to be followed. Now for faith, Prabhupada explains two things again. One is be assured of success. Success is sure for the rigid practitioner. So devotee, a sadhak should be assured that I will definitely get success. Then this is a very famous part. Everybody has heard this story of a sparrow trying to empty the ocean because the ocean had taken away the, eggs of the ocean, and then Garuda comes and helps. So first aspect Prabhupada says, be assured of the success. This is faith. Determination and faith. Faith has two aspects. One is be assured. Second, Prabhupada says, similarly, the practice of yoga, especially bhakti yoga in Krishna consciousness, may appear to be very difficult job. But anyone who follows the principles with great determination, The Lord will surely help. Success is assured. Lord will surely help. These are the factors of faith that one should develop, while practicing sadhana. Now Prabhupada puts, the crux of the matter. The Lord will surely help, for God helps those who help themselves. Right? God helps those who help themselves. How Prabhupada has explained this? In a lecture, in a conversation, Prabhupada says, God helps those who help themselves means, what do you mean by helping themselves? Helping themselves means sticking to Krishna. When one sticks to Krishna, when one fixes his consciousness on Krishna, abides by Krishna, Krishna helps. Then Prabhupada gives example of finger. Right? A finger, say cut finger is there, somebody's finger got cut and it's lying on the road. The finger has to help himself by staying on to the hand. If finger repeatedly jumps out of the hand, how will the hand help the finger? Right? His finger repeatedly jumps out. His finger repeatedly disobeys. Then how will the hand help? Finger has to do only one thing. Stick on to the hand. All the nourishment will be given. All the treatment will be given. Energy, health, strength, everything, life of the finger will be given just by sticking on to the hand. So finger can help itself by sticking on to the hand or to the body. Rest body will help the finger. Same way God helps those who help themselves. So we can help ourselves by sticking on to the movement, sticking on to the process. Then we can be determined and have full faith that we'll overcome the influence of three modes. Then this pradhana, the contaminated consciousness, right, will not influence. Then exactly how the lotus leaf is in the water, unaffected by the water. It's not rotten by the water. If you put any other leaf, mango leaf or any other, some leaf you put in water for 5 days, 6 days, it will start, dissolving. It will start getting stale, But lotus leaf, whole life it stays there in the water, it's unaffected. So this unaffected there is an insulation on the lotus leaf. Even if water touches it, it slips off. That insulation is just sticking on to, abiding by Krishna, sticking on to Krishna, helping oneself. So God helps those who help themselves, and surely Lord will help. So this is how Lord Kapila will further explain the influence of these modes, and then further explain how by devotional service one can very quickly overcome this. So we'll stop here. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.